January, and you are here for a English lesson. And this English lesson is going to follow on from our lessons from last week. So last week we started thinking about the key skills needed to write a story. Then towards the end of the week we started planning our own stories. Now today in this session we are going to be writing the introduction of a story. So essentially our challenge is to write a setting description. Within this lesson, you need your story map, you need a pencil and a piece of paper, and you need your setting and character description pictures if you completed these on Friday. Don't worry if you didn't, because I gave you Thursday and Friday to finish your story map. That was just an extra challenge for those who had finished. So if you haven't got those things, pause the video now and go and collect them. Brilliant, so let's make a start of our lesson. This is the introduction of The Lion and the Unicorn, the story that we've been thinking about. So it says, London's burning, fetch the engines, fire, 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 pour on water. Every evening, soon after dark, the warning sirens wailed. Then came the awful droning of enemy aircraft overhead, and firebombs and explosive whined and whistled out of the sky. So it's quite descriptive, isn't it? We can really picture, just from that writing, without even looking at the picture, what's going on. Now, here I have a picture of St Paul's Cathedral, that's St Paul's Cathedral in London, during the Blitz. Okay, so look at what you can see. Now, just like I asked some of you to do on Friday, I've put some of the key words that when I look at this picture, I think of. So I've put St Paul's Cathedral, I've put London because St Paul's Cathedral is in London, I've put bombs, I've put destruction, I've put rubble, sirens, smoke and dust. Then using these words, I will be able to write a setting description, the introduction to my story. Now, I have split the next bit of the lesson into your two groups for English in your home learning. So we've got group 1 and we've got group 2. Now, if you're unsure of what group you are in, if you refer back to last week and the Teams invites that were sent to you, you will know whether you are in group 1 or group 2. Now, the first group that I'm going to talk to within this session is group 2. However, I would like group 1 to listen in as well, because some of the things that I'm talking to group 2 about, for group 1, these are your non-negotiables. So it's always good to have a reminder. So I would like you to listen into these things too. Okay, so when writing a setting description, you need to think about these key questions. Essentially, you need to think about the senses. So what could they see? What could you see? What could they hear? What could they feel? What could they taste? If you answer all of these questions within your writing, you're going to write a really good setting description. So if you would like to, you could pause the video now and think about your setting description. How would you answer these questions in your setting description? Pause the video now and make a note. Okay, well done, Sycamore. Thank you for doing that. Let's move on. So this is an example for group 2, but remember group 1, you're listening in as well. Once upon a time, there was a happy boy called Stanley, who was 8 years old. His lovely house had been destroyed in a bombing. It was just rubble now. He didn't know what was going to happen. He saw his favourite teddy and picked it up. Then he heard a noise behind him, so he turned around and saw his beautiful mum. Now what I'd like you to do is pause the video and note down some of the things that I've done that you think are good for an introduction setting description. What have I done in there that you think that would be really important in a setting description? Okay, pause the video now. Brilliant. Let's compare what you have put to some of the things that I would like you to make sure you include in your setting description. So, within this piece of writing, you will notice that I have used capital letters. Can you see at the beginning of each of my sentences, I have used a capital letter. I've also used a capital letter for the name of the boy in my story. You'll also notice at the end of my sentences, I have put a full stop because that's really important, isn't it? Okay, the next one, apostrophes for contraction. So for example, I have put didn't in my writing. Didn't is short for did not, but I need to use an apostrophe because I've joined them to make the one word. Another thing that I have included, and in fact really I could have been a bit better with this in my writing, is time connectives. So I've put once upon a time, that's a time connective, it's telling us when it happened, and then it's telling you the order that something happened. So I'd like you to do that. Cursive letter formation. I don't actually have a cursive font on this laptop, but I expect you to use cursive letters. And you'll also have noticed in your pack for this week, I have made some cursive handwriting videos where you can practice. And finally, what I would like you to include in your writing is some noun phrases. So I would like you to use adjectives essentially to describe a noun. For example, I have put here, and he saw his beautiful mum. So mum is the noun because that's a name, place or a thing, and beautiful is the adjective. Now, we are only writing the introduction today. You do not go on to write the next bit of your story. You're just describing the setting and introducing your character, just like I have done here. So the children in group 2, you could stop the video now and have a go. Okay, thank you group 2. Now group 1, we're going to carry on because I'm expecting a bit more from you. Just like I would in class, I'd expect more from you. So, group 1, here is 2 paragraphs that I have written. So I'm going to read this to you now, so you can read along. Stanley had lived by St. Paul's Cathedral for his whole life. At 8 years old, he now stood looking at the rubble that used to be his home. Smoke and dust surrounded him like a cloud of darkness. Each night he had heard the awful droning of the enemy aircraft overhead, but he had always thought that they would be all right. He could not believe his eyes. What would happen to him now? The street where he had grown up was now lifeless. There were still sirens that could be heard in the distance, although for now poor Stanley couldn't hear a sound as he took in his gloomy surroundings. Stanley took a step closer to what was his home and saw his favourite teddy lying there with his arms outstretched. Tiptoeing like a mouse, Stanley reached out to pick it up. All of a sudden he heard a noise behind him. He looked round and he saw his lovely mum. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and think about what skills have I used in my introduction. What things have I put in here that I would like you to do in your writing? Pause the video now and note your ideas down. Brilliant, group 1. So, just like we would do in school, on the next slide, which I'll move over to in a minute, have got these 2 paragraphs. And then I've annotated them, I've labelled them like we would do on the board with some of the skills that we will be using in our introduction. Okay. So, let's look at it in order. So, just like in the other group, in group 2, I've included all the non-negotiables like capital letters, full stops, finger spaces, all that kind of thing. Now, I've just realised actually that the arrow here pointed to conjunction is actually now in the wrong place. So if we go back, that arrow there should be pointing to but, because that is a conjunction. We also have another conjunction here, although. So within your introduction, I'm expecting you to use a range of conjunctions to join the sentences and clauses together. I'm also expecting you to use similes. So, smoke and dust surrounded him like a cloud of darkness. What else would be really good is if you included a question. So, again, the arrow has gone funny, but question, what would happen to him now? That question is really good in the introduction because it's getting the reader to think about what might happen. It's not giving them all the answers now, it's making them want to read on, isn't it? What else have I included? I have included, just like in the other group, I've included adjectives to really add to the description. I've also, you will notice here, each night he had heard the awful droning of the enemy aircraft overhead. Now, if you think back to the Lion and the Unicorn, I have actually magpied those words, haven't I? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's really good if it's going to up-level our work. I have also included a fronted adverbial, so I'm telling you when something has happened all of a sudden, and you will notice I have put a comma there after my fronted adverbial. Now, here are some just overall points that I want you to think about when writing your introduction. So I have said here, I have used a range of sentence openers. So you will see that, for example, this sentence begins with Stanley, this one begins with at, smoke, each, he, what, the. Each of my sentences is starting with a different word, rather than saying Stanley did this, Stanley did that, he did this. It makes my writing seem a bit more interesting, doesn't it? You'll also notice that I have used a range of pronouns. So that means I haven't just used Stanley's name over and over again, and I haven't just used he all over again. It just makes your writing a bit more interesting. Now, another thing that you will notice is that I've put my writing into two chunks. These are called paragraphs, and the reason that I've used a paragraph here is because I've started to talk about something different. So, although it's still a setting description, I've moved on and started talking about the sirens. So that is why I've left a line and then gone on to write about something different. Super. So I want you to think about all of these things and have a go at them in your own introduction. So this is your chance to have a go now. So have a go and upload your work to Class Dojo.